Pandey. I am research manager at GovLab. In my present capacity, I've been leading research projects, especially the ones concerned with entrepreneurship development and labor market issues. We were just about to start this quantitative survey to identify the factors affecting the growth of micro and small entrepreneurs in Province 2 and Province 5 when this nationwide lockdown was instituted because of the pandemic. So we had to re-evaluate whether we wanted to continue with this quantitative survey or we wanted to do something else. And we concluded that in a quantitative survey, this pandemic would be a big confounding factor. So in order to actually understand what the fundamental issues faced by MSCs in these two provinces were, we decided to collect a rich set of data through qualitative interview. So we ended up conducting in-depth interviews with several entrepreneurs and stakeholders. Like I mentioned, we had to shift from quantitative to qualitative research, but we did not necessarily come up with some new research methodologies per se, but we did have to make an adjustment on what kind of research methods we were using. I can think of three big differences. The first one is that especially when you're conducting interviews through mobile phones or applications like Skype and Viber, you are limited to the explicitly communicated information, right? So we could not observe the context in which the micro entrepreneurs were operating. The second big difference was that there was a loss of information due to technical glitches, as well as our inability to observe the non-verbal cues, right? So when we're talking to people in person, we're able to look at their expressions, their body languages, etc., which is not possible when you're doing it, especially over phone. And the final difference that we noticed is that it is difficult to establish trust with the respondents when you're talking to them over phone. So when you're talking to this faceless person, it is difficult for the respondents to trust you and then divulge some of the information. So there may be some discrepancy as to what kind of answers you would receive when you're talking to them in person versus over a virtual meeting. In our experience, we have to take care of four different things when we are conducting research in this kind of settings. The first one is that we have to be cognizant of the fact that the pandemic may be affecting one or more of the variables of interest, right? For example, in our case, when we're talking about the growth motivations of the micro and small entrepreneurs, it is likely that they are unable to isolate the fundamental issues that they are facing from this huge factor of the pandemic that they are under right now. The second thing is that we have to be cognizant of the selection bias, right? For example, when we're conducting interviews via cell phones or through internet, only those people who have access to those technologies will be in our sample, right? So that will lead to a selection bias. Similarly, people may be less likely to divulge certain kind of information through a virtual medium as opposed to in-person interviews. So that will lead to another kind of bias as well. The third thing is we need to try and build a relationship of trust with the respondents. It is, as you can imagine, difficult for them to open up with a faceless person over a phone, right? So before we go into the depth of the interviews, it is essential that we have some kind of information rapport with them and build this relationship of trust. And finally, we have to make sure before we start the interviews that we have sorted out our technologies. You can easily lose the respondents over technical glitches. Okay? And so to the extent it is possible, have the best arrangements ready before you conduct the interviews, and always have a backup plan. If one option doesn't work, you have something to fall back on. great learning experience for a lot of us, and that includes some of the young researchers. My message to them would be that we have to learn to make the best out of the situation that we are in, right? Therefore, instead of trying to avoid this huge elephant in the room, that is the pandemic, try to think of this situation as an opportunity where you can incorporate a different but important issue into your research, right? And we have to remember that this won't be the last crisis of its sort. So we have to learn to adapt our work to such challenging settings.